All right, very good evening to everyone. I hope I am audible, I am visible. Please write yes in the chat box if everything is okay, so that we can start with the session. Great. Okay. So Sneha says yes, Rajshri says yes, Ali, Payal, Shelly, Rahul, Ishika. Great, great. So in this particular session, we are going to discuss on the basics of the standards. Okay, we are going to discuss on the different types of standards that are there. Then we are going to start with our three basic standards: SA 200, SA 210, and then we are going to cover SA 230 also. Okay, but before I start with any standard, let us first try and understand what are the different types of standards that are there, and then we are going to start up with the standards on auditing. Okay, all right. Now, a chartered accountant, if he's into practice, all right, or should I should put it in this way, a chartered accountant can serve the society in two different manners. Either he can be in practice, you must all be knowing about this, or he can serve, or he can be under an employment, and he can serve the society by being an employee. Okay, so he can be under an employment also. Now, when I say a chartered accountant in practice, chartered accountant in practice can render services to the society. He can give two types of services to the society. He can give two types of services to the society. One is a service wherein he gives assurance to the users. So we call it as assurance services. A service wherein he basically increases the assurance which the users place on the, let's say, financials, etc., whatever the subject matter is. So a service wherein the user's assurance is increased can be termed as assurance services. I'm just discussing it in very layman's terms as of now. We are going to dive into the technical aspect also. Okay, so a practitioner, a chartered accountant who is into practice, internationally he is called as a practitioner. Okay, a practitioner may render services which can be, one is assurance services, and other we call it as other services. Okay, so why am I trying to cover all these things? Because you need to understand the different types of standards for different kinds of services which a chartered accountant in practice renders. We have different types of standards. Okay, so first we need to understand the different types of standards. All right, so what is an assurance engagement? What is an assurance service? Let us understand this part first. Okay, so we have a definition here: assurance engagement. It means, assurance engagement means an engagement. Engagement means work. Engagement simply means work. So assurance engagement is a work in which a practitioner expresses a conclusion. Practitioner as in a chartered accountant in practice. I have already told you this, that internationally we use the term practitioner. Okay, so a practitioner expresses a conclusion, and when a practitioner expresses a conclusion, it is designed to enhance the degree of confidence of the intended users other than the responsible party about the outcome of evaluation or measurement of a subject matter against a given criteria. So this is relatively a very technical definition, but let us try and make it very simple. What is an assurance engagement? Okay, let us understand it first. Let's say there is a responsible party. There is party called responsible party. Okay, for the time being, consider them, you can compare them with the management. Okay, let's say that technically we are calling the management as responsible party. Okay, and let's say they prepare something which we call it subject matter. They have prepared something which we call it as subject matter. Okay, and this subject matter will be used by a lot of users. Okay, if you want to just connect the subject matter, just consider it as financial statements. Okay, so we have a responsible party, they prepare the subject matter, and this subject matter is actually used by a lot of users. Okay, but how will this users rely on this subject matter which has been prepared by the responsible party, which has been prepared by, let's say, the management? So what happens is, responsible party appoints, or let's say they take the services of a practitioner. They take the services of a practitioner. Okay. And what does the practitioner do? The practitioner will basically evaluate this subject matter. The practitioner is going to evaluate. Yeah, the practitioner is going to evaluate the subject matter against a given set of criteria. We have certain criteria, and the practitioner is going to evaluate the subject matter against the given set of criteria. And upon evaluating, after he is done with evaluation, let's say he gives his conclusion. He gives his conclusion in the form of a report. Okay, and this conclusion, when he expresses it in the form of a report, it basically enhances the confidence that the users can place on the subject matter. So in short, I can say when a practitioner evaluates a subject matter against a given criteria, and on the basis of his evaluation he gives a conclusion, right? So it gives an assurance to the users. Now they will be able to place, I can say, more reliance on this subject matter. Okay, so please understand that if a chartered accountant in practice is rendering this kind of services, wherein he gives an opinion, he expresses an opinion, which ultimately increases the confidence which the users can place on the subject matter, this type of service, is known as assurance engagement. We call it as assurance engagement. All right. Again, let me tell you, assurance means what? The users will now be able to place more reliance on the subject matter which is prepared by the responsible party. Now, this is a technical definition, but if I want to tell you if I want to discuss this in layman's terms, let us assume it in this way, that the responsible party is, let's say, the management. Okay, you all know that the management is responsible for the preparation and presentation of financial statements. So the subject matter can be, let's say, the financial statements. And you all know this, you have covered it in chapter 1 also of your auditing subject, that there are different users of the financial statements. Different users of financial statement, as in the management is one of the users, your lenders, the bank can be one of the users, prospective investors, the shareholders, the employees, the creditors, all these are the users of the financial statement. So how will these users place reliance on the financial statement that has been prepared by the management? Okay, so in order to increase the user's confidence in the financial statement, or let's say the subject matter, responsible party takes the services of a practitioner. The practitioner evaluates the subject matter against a given set of criteria, and then he expresses his opinion. He gives a conclusion. Okay, upon this he gives this conclusion, or let's say his opinion, in the form of an audit report, and this audit report basically increases the assurance which the users will now be able to place on the financial statements, or let's say the subject matter. Okay, so again, please understand, a practitioner can render two types of services. One is assurance engagement or assurance services, or let's say the other one is other services, wherein the auditor as such is not giving any assurance as such, but he is giving some other services. For example, now let's say you are the management. Okay, you come to me and you tell me that we don't have knowledge about, let's say, Schedule 3 of the Companies Act. We don't have knowledge about the accounting standards. So will you, sir, please prepare our financial statements? So I on the behalf of management, I am a chartered accountant, I'll prepare the financials for you and give it to you. But here I'm not giving any assurance services. This is just a service of, let's say, compilation of financial statement. Okay, so this will come under other services. Few more examples, let me give it to you. Let's say the company comes to me and they say that, sir, we don't know how to consolidate. We have a subsidiary company, we don't know how to make a consolidated financial statement. So will you give this service to us? You have expert knowledge in accounting standards and the preparation, let's say, of financial statements. Will you be able to do it for us? So I'll say, yes, I'll charge this much amount of fees, and yeah, I'll just consolidate and give it to you. So here we are not giving any opinion. We are just doing the work of the management, and we are charging fees for it. We just, let's say, the client receives a letter from the income tax department, and they request us, sir, whether will you be able to represent our company in front of the assessing officer. So I take a fee for it, and I render the service. So in this kind of services, the examples which I have just given you, we are not giving any assurance service here. We are not giving any assurance services. Rather, we just call it as, we can also call it as non-assurance services, or we call it as other services. Okay, so why have I discussed all this? Now please understand. Let me just open a chart for you. The purpose of discussing this was to make you guys understand that, yeah, there are different types of standards. So first we need to understand the different types of standards. I have already told you that a chartered accountant can render services in two services. Basically, one is assurance service and the other one is other services. So now let us discuss assurance service first. Okay, so under assurance service, we have few more services. Now we are actually going into the detail of assurance services. Now if I am providing a service which is basically related to historical financial statements or information, if I am a chartered accountant in practice, you are my client, let's say I am providing you a service, assurance services, which is related to historical financial statement. Now what do you mean by historical financial statement? Something which has already happened. Okay, now let's say we are in the month of October, and basically I am giving you service with respect to the financials of financial year ending 31st March 2020. So these are the things which have already happened. Okay, so it can be called as historical financial statements. Okay, and the other services related to other than historical financial statements. So other than historical financial statements, I'm going to give you examples, don't worry about it. All right, again, so we are discussing assurance service, and in under assurance service we have two types of services. Again, first is related to the historical financial statements or information, and the other one is related to other than historical financial information. Let's understand first the services related to historical financial statements or information. Okay, so now in case, let's say now we are providing services, we are going to provide services with respect to historical financial statements. Now let's say this is a financial statement with me, okay, and I am giving a service wherein I give an opinion. Okay, obviously I'll go through the subject matter, I'll evaluate the subject matter against a given set of criteria, and I'm going to come up with an opinion. Now if I come up with a reasonable assurance, okay, on this historical financial statement, I give an opinion, I give a reasonable assurance, okay, then this type of work will be called as audit. Please remember this is very important point. What I am discussing here is, we are working on historical financial statements, and on that historical financial statements I give an opinion, I give a reasonable assurance. Okay, then this type of work will be called as audit. All right, if on these historical financial statements I give a limited assurance. Now what is reasonable assurance, what is moderate assurance, I'm just going to discuss with you, but let us first understand the different kinds of work that we can give. Okay, so if I'm giving a limited assurance, if it is a moderate assurance, it will be called as review. Okay, this is different from audit. Please understand, when we are doing the audit, let's say of financial statements, the auditor will give reasonable assurance. Okay, but when he reviews the financial statements, when he reviews the subject matter, okay, we don't give an reasonable assurance here, we provide limited assurance. So this kind of work will be called as review. Okay, now what is the difference between reasonable assurance and, or let's say, moderate or limited assurance? Okay, please understand this, that you all know this, you must have gone through this topic of inherent limitations of audit. Okay, we all know that in audit, we cannot give absolute assurance, we cannot give an opinion with 100% accuracy. Okay, we cannot guarantee on things. So in audit, please remember, absolute assurance, we never give absolute assurance. Okay, but when I say audit, what is audit? Okay, audit is a service wherein the auditor provides reasonable assurance. Okay, so what is reasonable assurance? Please understand this. If I write it for you, yes, what is reasonable assurance? Reasonable assurance is basically, I can say, high assurance. This is a very high level of assurance, but not, it is not an absolute assurance, but not absolute assurance. Okay, absolute assurance is not possible. We'll cover this topic, inherent limitations of audit, all this. Okay, so reasonable assurance is a high level of assurance, but it is not a absolute level of assurance. When I say high level, so almost we can say, yeah, with certainty that let's say almost 80% of the things, this is just a hypothetical number, almost 80% of the things are okay. This is what reasonable assurance can mean. Okay, but when I say moderate assurance, second is, let's say, moderate assurance. What is moderate assurance? Let us understand this. Moderate assurance means it is we call it as moderate assurance, but not a high assurance. Okay, I can call it as, let's say, it is a limited assurance, or let's say moderate assurance, but not high assurance. Okay, so if you can see the level of confidence that we are trying to convey to the users through our opinion here. All right, in case of reasonable assurance, we give a very high level of assurance. So automatically I can say, when we are giving a very high level of assurance to the users, probably the work that we are going to do on the financials will be in much more detail as compared to when we give a moderate level of assurance. So in moderate assurance, we don't evaluate the subject matter in as much detail as compared to reasonable assurance, but yes, we just go through the subject matter and we come up with a limited assurance. We come up with a moderate assurance. And please understand, when I say moderate assurance is a limited assurance, but it is not a high assurance. So we are giving relatively lower level of assurance here as compared to reasonable assurance. Okay, all right, now please understand, coming back to the chart. Yes, I was discussing with you that the auditor will provide assurance service. First is assurance services related to historical financial statement. Okay, and when we are giving services with respect to historical financial statement and we give a reasonable assurance, again high level of assurance but not absolute assurance, this work is called as audit. But when we don't basically evaluate things in as much detail as we do it in case of audit, we call it as review, and in review we give moderate or limited assurance. Okay, now again, we have one more type of work which we can perform here, is which is services related to other than historical financial statements. Services related to other than historical financial statements. Now, what is other than historical financial statement? You all must have heard about projected financial statements. Okay. Let's say I go to a bank. Okay, the client wants to take a loan of, let's say, 5 crore rupees. So the bank manager asks the client to prepare financials, projected financials of next 5 years, let's say. So the purpose of the bank asking for projected financials is to check whether this particular client will be able to repay their installments or not, whether the future of the company is viable enough or not, so as to pay their installments or interest, whatever it is. Okay, so the bank may ask you to prepare 5 years projected financial statements. All right, now let's say you approach me to prepare a 5-year financial statement. Now please understand this. Okay, when I'm preparing, when I'm, let's say, giving my opinion on something which has not happened yet, when I'm obviously I can say, when I'm trying to basically evaluate something which is about the future, let's say a projected financial statement, for example. So I cannot give a reasonable assurance or an absolute assurance at all here. Okay, if at all I am able to give a reasonable assurance also, probably I shouldn't be called as an auditor, I should be called as an astrologer, because these are things which has not happened and still I am giving a absolute assurance, or let's say reasonable assurance. So this is not going to happen. All right, so please remember, when we work upon let's say financial statements which are, let's say, other than historical financial statements, let's say projected financial statements. So in this type of services, we never give reasonable assurance also, we only come up with moderate or limited level of assurance. Okay, and I've already explained it to you that moderate level of assurance is a assurance level which is basically limited assurance, but not a high level of assurance. Okay, so it is relatively lesser, we give a lesser amount of assurance as compared to audit. So what is this kind of work called as? This kind of work is called as assurance only. Now please don't get confused, the institute has not come up with any new name for this kind of services. They probably were not able to come up with a different name for this service, so they have kept it as assurance. Okay, so please let me just summarize this, that when I talk about assurance services, it can be with respect to historical financial statements, and it can be with respect to other than historical financial statements also. When we are dealing with historical financial statements and you give a reasonable assurance, we call this type of services as audit. Okay. And uh, when I'm dealing with historical financial statements and I'm giving a moderate level of assurance, probably I'll call this kind of work as review. All right. Secondly, when we are dealing with other than historical financial information, that means projected financial statements, etc. Obviously, I'll never give an absolute or reasonable assurance here. We'll come up with only moderate or limited level of assurance, and this type of work we call it as assurance only. All right. Then apart from assurance service, I told you that there might be sometimes some other kinds of work like compilation of financial statements, let's say consolidation of holding and subsidiary, representing the client in front of income tax authorities. All the services wherein we don't give any assurance, we are not giving any form of opinion there. Okay. We can render this type of services also. So in other services we don't give any assurance here, no assurance, we are not providing any assurance to the users here. All right. So this type of services, we call them as related services. Now why have I made you understand all these different kind of services? Probably now you are in a position to understand this. When you are giving reasonable assurance on historical financial statement, it is called as audit. And please guys understand this, then when you are doing an audit, you need to follow the standards which is called as standards on auditing. We need to follow SA, standards on auditing. Okay. But if we are, let's say, giving only a limited review on the historical financial statements, we are not checking the financials in as much details as we do in audit. We are just let's say going through in a less detailed manner. Okay, we call this as review. And if you are doing a review engagement, if you are working, if you are going to give moderate assurance, let's say if you are doing a work of review, we follow standard which is called as standards on review engagement. In short, it is called as SRE, right? Okay. But when you are giving an assurance, moderate assurance on financials other than historical financial statement, we call it as assurance. And when you give this type of services, you need to ensure that you follow standards on assurance engagement, which is called as SAE. Okay. And when we are giving other services also, wherein we don't provide any assurance as such, but still, we need to follow certain standards whenever we discharge, whenever we perform any work. All right. So in case of related services also, we need to follow certain standards which we call it as SRS. It is called as standards on related services. All right. So guys, these are the different types of standards. Which a chartered accountant has to follow while he is discharging his duties, while he is performing his work. Okay. But because in CA Inter we are only going to focus on this particular aspect, standards on auditing, because the CA Inter syllabus, entire syllabus is with respect to the audit of financial statements, and as such in our course also we have only standards on auditing prescribed by ICI. So we are going to focus on standards on auditing. Okay. So we have four different types of standards here. Collectively all these four types of standards are called as engagement standards, because engagement means work. Okay. So depending on the type of work you are doing for the client, it may be audit, it may be review, it may be assurance, it may be related services, you have to comply with, you have to follow all these standards. Okay. So again I'm repeating, collectively you call these standards as engagement standards. Okay. But apart from these engagement standards, guys, apart from these engagement standards, as a accountant, as a chartered accountant, as a practitioner, we need to ensure that we maintain the highest level of quality while discharging any of the work, whether we are doing an audit, whether we are doing a review, whether we are, let's say, giving an opinion on the projected financial statements, or let's say we are just compiling the financials of the client. Any work that we do, we need to ensure that we maintain the quality, we maintain the topmost quality while giving all these functions. So apart from these four standards, we have one more standard to cover. Apart from these four standards, we have one more standards to cover, which we call it as quality control standard. We call it as quality control standard. So please remember, we have 4 types of engagement standard. I have already covered this. We have standards on auditing, okay, we have standards on review engagements, we have standards on assurance engagements, we have standards on related services. Okay, these 4 standards are collectively known as engagement standards. But whatever service you are let's say giving to the client, we need to ensure that quality is maintained. So we need to follow quality standard also. And as of now, we have one quality standard that is to be covered in our syllabus, which is SQC1. So SQC1 is a quality control standard, and all these 4 remaining standards, SA, SRE, SAE and SRS, these are basically our engagement standards. Okay, so I hope you are clear on the different types of standards that we have. And obviously we have in our CA intermediate syllabus, we need to focus on standards on auditing, and also we'll be covering SQC1 also, which is quality control. So please remember, quality control and engagement standards, they are different. Okay, any work as an auditor, as a practitioner, if you are rendering any work, okay, you need to ensure the quality. So, and accordingly we have to follow SQC1 also. All right, so yes, before I proceed further, do you have any doubts on this? I'm just going to make you guys read SA, what is SA, SRE, SAE and SRS. We are just going to quickly read the content, and then we are going to start with the standard. Okay, so any doubts with respect to this first? Okay, Ali is asking, sir, do other services include the services specified in section 144 of the Companies Act? Yes, obviously. Let's say the client comes to us that you please manage our books of accounts. So maintenance of books of accounts, is a service which is well covered under section 144. Okay, all right, Devika says clear. Great. Okay, now again, so let's be very quick and let's just go through what is SA, what is SRE, SAE and SRS, and so that it is very clear to you, and you are able to distinguish well between them. Okay, all right, so what is what is standards on auditing? Let's understand. These standards are to be applied in the audit of historical financial statements. You all know this, or historical financial information. The auditor's opinion enhances the credibility of the financial statements by providing. So I told you what kind of assurance you are providing in standards when you are doing audit. We provide high but not an absolute level of assurance. So we are providing a high level of assurance here, but not an absolute level of assurance. Okay, now coming to the standards on review engagements, SRE, these standards are to be applied in the review of historical financial statements. Please remember the keyword. One is audit of historical financial statement, next is review. So what is the difference between audit and review? Okay, if in layman's terms, if I want to make you understand, review, you can consider review as a younger brother of audit. Okay, in review we are not going to check things in as much as details as we do it in audit. In audit, you have to gain an understanding of the internal controls of the organization, and accordingly you determine the nature, timing and extent of your further audit procedures. But in review, we don't even check on the controls, etc. Okay, so while a review involves the application of auditing skills and techniques and the gathering of evidence, it does not involve a detailed assessment of accounting and internal control systems. Please remember this, Ryan, that in review we are not going to do a detailed assessment. We are not going to check things in as much detail as we do it in audit. So please understand this, that review is, you can consider it as younger brother of audit. Okay, all right, so this is review. All right, and obviously the level of assurance provided in a review report is correspondingly less than given in audit report. So when you are doing an audit, you are giving a high level of assurance, but when we do a review, we only give a moderate level of assurance. Okay, then we have standards on assurance engagements. You all know this, that what is an assurance engagement? When we are dealing with subject matters other than historical financial statements, for example, prospective financial information, etc. Okay, and then we have standards on related services. These standards are to be applied to engagements to apply agreed upon procedures to information, let's say compilation engagements, other related services, etc. So when we do other services wherein we are not providing any assurance to the users, but still we need to follow certain standards, which we call it as standards on related services. Okay, so all these 4 standards, I'm repeating it again, all these 4 standards are known as engagement standards. But apart from these 4 standards, we have one more standard which we call it as standards on quality control, SQC. Okay, so SQCs are to be applied for all services, any type of services that you are providing. That is why, if you remember, I just drew it here, that any service you provide, you have to follow SQC, you have to ensure quality. Okay, so let us read the line here. Standards on quality control are to be applied for all services covered by the engagement standards. All right, and SQCs are written to apply to firms in respect of their services falling under engagement standards. So it is applicable at the firm level. All right, so we are going to discuss SQC1 also in our revision session at the later stages. But please remember, SQC1 has to be applied if you are giving any type of services, if you are all the services covered by the engagement standards. So if you are giving any of the 4 services that we have just discussed, you need to comply. You need to comply with the requirement of SQC also. All right, so guys, this was the basics of different types of standards. And because I have told you that our focus area will be obviously on the standards on auditing. Okay, so just let's you all know this, I am not going to discuss it in detail here, that the classification of standards, you all know that standards have been given certain names and the numbers. Okay, so we have a series from 100 to 199 which are called as introductory matters. It is not yet notified. Okay, so you don't need to worry about it. Then we have series 200 to 299, so we call it as general principles and responsibilities. We have 300 to 499 which we call it as risk assessment and response to assess risk. Then 500 series, you all know this, it is related to audit evidence. 600 to 699, again using work of others. 700 to 799 is audit conclusions and reporting, up all about audit report. You must have covered SS 700, 701 on key audit matters, 705 on modified audit report. All these standards we are going to cover under SS 700 series. Okay, and 800, again it is with respect to specialized areas, not in your syllabus. Okay, so 800 series, again it is not there in your syllabus. All right, so this is just the list of all the standards that we need to cover. Okay, and yeah, many standards, we have just mentioned all the standards in the respective series, but there are certain standards which is not a part of your syllabus. For example, 800 series is not to be done in CA Inter. Okay, so now these are the name of the standards along with the numbers. Okay, in our session today, we are going to cover, I'm going to try and cover 3 standards. Okay, we are going to cover up quickly SA 200, we are going to discuss 210, and then finally we are going to cover 230 also. All right, so is the basics part clear, everyone? Please, if it is clear, please write yes in the chat box. Let me see how many of you are attending the session, how many of you are alert, how many of you are not sleeping. Great. Okay, Shweta says yes, Anjali, Shelly, Renu, Zubia, Rajshri, Shruti. Great. All right, so everyone ready for SA 200? Yes, all right, fine, great. So let us start with SA 200. All right, the basic standard for the entire standards on auditing, SA 200. The name of the standard, pretty long name, and just you have to remember the name. Okay, Sanjushi is asking, will the notes be available? Yes, it will be available on the Telegram channel, don't worry about it. Okay, all right, so SA 200, overall objectives of the independent auditor. Now there are 2 parts in it. Okay, please remember this. SA 200, overall objectives of the independent auditor and the conduct of audit in accordance with standards on auditing. So if you want to remember the name, just break it down into 2 parts. First is overall objectives of the independent auditor, and the conduct of audit in accordance with standards on auditing. This is SA 200. Okay, now in essay 200, I have divided the entire standard to be covered into three parts. If you can see here, we are going to discuss on the objectives of independent auditor first, then what is the actual requirement of essay 200, we are going to cover that, then finally we are going to conclude this standard by covering a topic which is inherent limitations of audit, again very important from CA Inter's perspective. Okay, so let us first start with the objectives of independent auditor. Now, what is the objective of an independent auditor? All right, so we have two objectives here: to obtain reasonable assurance. Now please understand again, because this is a standard on auditing, we have just covered that, and in when we do a work of audit, we provide reasonable assurance. Okay, and let me remind you that reasonable assurance means a high level of assurance, but it is not an absolute assurance. When I say I'm giving an absolute assurance, that means I'm giving a guarantee. I'm saying something with 100% accuracy, right? But when I do an audit, I cannot give an absolute assurance. I only can provide reasonable assurance. So reasonable assurance is not an absolute assurance, but somehow it is a very high level of assurance. Let's say somehow around 80% of things we check and we comment upon. Okay, so what are the objectives of an independent auditor? So first objective is to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. Okay, I'm not going to discuss the word material misstatements and all here. I'm assuming that you know the basics. Okay, so to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. Okay, and what is going to happen after this? What is going to happen if he obtains reasonable assurance? So that the auditor, so as to enable the auditor to express an opinion that the financial statements are prepared as per applicable financial reporting framework. So this is the first objective. Let me read it again. The auditor will obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. Okay, and why is he going to obtain this assurance? So that he is able to give an opinion. This will enable the auditor to express an opinion that yes, your financial statements are prepared as per applicable FRF. Now if it is a company, obviously we know what can be the applicable FRF. I want you to answer this. Let's say our client is a company. What can be the applicable FRF? Yes, Shally is right. Schedule 3. Few more examples. Yes. Okay. Schedule 3. So yes, you all know this. If it is a company, they need their applicable FRF is, let's say they need to prepare the financials as per Schedule 3. Okay. They need to calculate the managerial remuneration again as per a schedule. They need to calculate depreciation, let's say, as per Schedule 2. They need to follow accounting standards as per section 133. So all this, you know, that it will be basically the financial reporting framework for a company. And you all know this, that if the financials, let's say, have been prepared, if there is a deviation from the applicable FRF, it amounts to misstatement. Okay, so yeah, banking company as per Banking Companies Act. Very, very nice. Yes. Okay, so different entities will have different FRF. So the first objective under SA 200 of the auditor is to obtain reasonable assurance. Again, now when I'm saying, please, I want all of you to repeat it with me. Okay, so that now we are done with 3 standards today itself. I am going to teach you, but at the same time, please ensure that you are also studying along with me. Okay, so what is the first objective? Please keep on repeating with me: to obtain reasonable assurance. To obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. Why? So that the auditor will be able to express an opinion that the financial statements are prepared as per applicable FRF. So this is the first objective. And secondly, once he is done with preparing the report, once he is in a position to give an opinion, obviously he is going to report the same. He is going to give a report on the financial statement and communicate as required by the standards on auditing. So secondly, having framed an opinion, he is going to basically express his opinion in the form of an audit report. So this is the second objective of the of SA 200. Okay, so this is a very basic thing. Okay, but yes, you have to understand this. Okay, why? Because let me tell you that a question has been, I believe a question was asked from this part also. Now let me just open my standards notes, and let us check what all questions have been asked from SA 200. We are going to try and cover all the questions that have been asked in the exam from SA 200. So I believe I remember that yes, one question from the objectives part it has been asked. Okay, so you see RTP, the question number 1, explain the overall objectives of independent auditor. If this question now comes, first question, explain the overall objectives of independent auditor, you need to write these 2 points. Okay, I'm repeating it again: to obtain reasonable assurance that financial statements are free from material misstatement, so as to enable the auditor to express an opinion on the financial statements that they are prepared as per FRF. And secondly, having framed an opinion, it is the duty of the auditor to report on the financial statement and communicate as required by the standards on auditing. Okay, so first question is done, explain the overall objectives of independent auditor, right? All right, so I told you that when we started with essay 200 that we are going to cover essay 200 in 3 parts. Okay, so we are already done with part number 1, which is objectives of independent auditor. Now let us start with the second part, requirements of essay 200, which is really very important from CA Inter's perspective. They can ask you question directly from this part. Okay, so we have very simple 5 requirements, and this is an important question. We have 5 requirements of essay 200. Okay, what are the 5 requirements? Ethical requirements, then we have professional skepticism, then professional judgment, then sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, and finally the conduct of an audit in accordance with the standards on auditing. Please remember guys, a direct question from this portion can be asked in the exam. Explain the requirements of essay 200. Directly they ask you, explain the requirements of essay 200. So please remember, we have 5 requirements: ethical requirements, professional skepticism, professional judgment, sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, and conduct of audit in accordance with standards on auditing. Now I'm going to take each of these requirements one by one. Okay, when I say ethical requirements, you know, from this ethical requirements portion, a separate question can also be asked. Okay, so what is ethical requirement? Basically, I have written here in very simple terms: the auditor shall comply with relevant ethical requirements, including independence. You know, the auditor needs to comply with the code of ethics which is issued by ICAI. Please understand guys, I hope you are with me. We are trying to cover the requirements of essay 200. Okay, and we have 5 requirements. We are on requirement number 1, which is ethical requirement. Okay, so what is ethical requirement? The auditor, you know, he is required to comply with the code of ethics which is issued by ICAI, and he needs to ensure independence also. So what I have written here, the auditor shall comply with the relevant ethical requirements, including independence. Okay, and he is required to comply with the code of ethics which is issued by ICAI. And 2 words, please remember: ethical requirements, including independence. All right, and when I say is required to comply with the code of ethics issued by ICAI, let's read certain principles of this, let's say, code of ethics. Okay, so he needs to comply with, basically he needs to maintain integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and he needs to maintain a professional behavior. Please remember now guys, please understand this. You know, they can separately ask you a question from this part also. Again, there is a question from this part. Let me take you to the questions topic. The question is, yes, yeah, relevant ethical requirements ordinarily comprise the code of ethics for which professional accountants related to an audit of financial statement discuss with reference to those fundamental principles of professional ethics. Again, a question that has been asked in RTP. What is the ultimate question? Fundamental principles of professional ethics. Discuss with reference to those fundamental principles of professional ethics. So these are, I can say, these are fundamental principles of professional ethics. What are the 5 fundamental principles of professional ethics? 1 is integrity, then objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and then we have professional behavior. Guys, please don't get confused. If they ask you what are the requirements of essay 200, we have 5 requirements. We have ethical requirements, we have professional skepticism, we have professional judgment, we have sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, and then we have conduct of audit in accordance with standards on auditing. But if they ask you on the principles of ethical requirements, if they ask you on the principles of the code of ethics, please mention these 5 requirements here. Points, number of points are same in both the cases, but obviously the answer is different. So please be very careful. Please read the question very carefully in the exam. All right, now what do you mean by integrity? Can anyone answer this? What do you mean by integrity? When I say the auditor is required to comply with the code of ethics issued by ICAI, what do you mean by integrity? So in simple terms, if I say integrity, you know, I can say that, yeah, the auditor should be, you know, straightforward. He should be straightforward. Yeah, he needs to be, I can also write, he needs to be honest. Yes, honest and sincere, honest behavior, absolutely. Shali, Ali, Jagdish, Himanshi, you all are right. He needs to be straightforward. He needs to be honest. In short, I am just discussing. When I say objectivity, what do you mean by objectivity? Yes. What do you mean by objectivity? The second principle. What do you mean by objectivity? Yes. Unbiased. Absolutely. Yes. This is a very good word which I can mention here. Unbiased. Okay. He needs to be unbiased. He needs to be independent. All right. Then we have professional competence and due care. Professional competence and due care. Okay. Now, third requirement, third code of ethics requirement, professional competence and due care. Please understand this, that once you become a chartered accountant, also you have to always be with your books. Most of us think that, okay, once we clear CA inter, once we clear CA final, and then our life will be cool, we don't have to study anymore. But please understand, the profession that we have chosen, we need to be updated every month. Modi ji comes up with a new law, so you need to be updated with the latest laws, with the latest provisions. If you don't keep yourself updated, the clients are not going to come to you. You shall not be aware of the latest requirements, latest regulations. So if you want to be in practice, or let's say you have to be updated, you have to be adaptive. So the third point is professional competence and due care. Yes, updated knowledge. If I say you need to have updated knowledge, in short, if I want to write here, I can just write updated knowledge. Yes. Okay. Then confidentiality. What I believe all of you know this, that the auditor should not disclose information obtained during the course of audit to a third party. So I am doing an audit. Let's say you are my client. If I am doing your audit, I shall come across a lot of information, but I shouldn't be disclosing this information to third party. But I can do this when it is my professional or let's say legal duty, or you have expressly permitted me to use the information. Let's say one particular aspect of your organization, I like it. Let's say your internal controls are very amazing, okay, and I am invited in a seminar to speak on internal controls. So with your permission, I can, if you allow me, I'll take a permission from you. If you allow me, I can give reference to the examples, I can give reference to the internal controls that you have implemented in your organization. Okay, so please understand that what is the general rule, that the auditor shall not disclose any information which he comes across during the course of audit to any third party. He is not going to disclose it to any third party, but yes, except when it is his professional or legal duty to do so. Let's say, for example, income tax authorities ask us something, we have to tell them about the related parties, we have to mention the names of the relatives, the types of transactions the company entered into with them. All these things we disclose, right? So it is a professional duty. And secondly, if we have been expressly permitted or authorized by the client to disclose the same. So this is with respect to confidentiality. Okay, then finally, last point, we need to be very professional. We have to maintain a professional behavior with our clients. Okay, we shouldn't get too much emotional with our clients. There has to be a professional behavior. Okay, professional relationship between the auditor and the auditee, right? So these are the 5 principles. Please remember, let me take you back to the question. Discuss with reference to those fundamental principles of professional ethics. They may ask you a separate question on this. Okay, so please remember it, guys. All right, now we are still under the requirements of SA 200. We are still discussing the first requirement, which is ethical requirement, and let's discuss a point here with respect to independence now. So we all know that the auditor shall be independent. Independence comprises both independence of mind and independence of appearance. We need to be independent, not just let's say going by the laws and the provisions. Independence should comprise both of independence of mind and independence of appearance. Okay, now what do you mean by this? Okay, let's say if I just give you a very simple example, my friend is having a company, let's say XYZ Private Limited. He is the director, or let's say he's managing XYZ Private Limited. He's my friend. He doesn't fall under the definition of relatives. Okay, he is my friend, so I can very well be appointed as an auditor of the company. Okay, but as per the law, I am independent here. But the moment I enter his office, the staff and all, they all see that these two are best friends, and the moment I go to the audit, I don't do work first, but we sit, we gossip, we chit chat, we laugh, and we watch IPL together. All this thing is happening and all the employees are watching. So what will the employees now think? That this auditor, is such a good friend of our boss, he cannot be independent. Even if there are mistakes in the financial statement, this auditor will never point it out because he's such good friends with our boss. So it shouldn't happen like this, independence should be in spirit. It should appear to third parties that yes, I am independent. Okay, it shouldn't be just by that going with the laws that yes, I am independent because I am auditing the financials of my friend. He is not a relative, so I am independent. But no, we need to appear as that yes, we are independent. Nobody should, no third party should have a doubt on our independence, right? So please understand that independence comprises both independence of mind and independence of threat. Okay, so guys, this was ethical requirements, very simple again. Done. Okay, now second requirement of SA 200 is professional skepticism. Now what is professional skepticism? Let's understand the meaning first. It is an attitude of the auditor. Obviously professional skepticism, it is an attitude of the auditor due to which we remain alert. We have to be alert for any possible misstatements in the financial statement. Now when I say professional skepticism, you need to be alert, you need to be vigilant throughout the audit of any possible misstatement. Now when I say we have to be vigilant, this doesn't mean that I have to look at my client with the eyes of suspicion every time. I don't need to be a person of suspicious nature. What happens, in practice, if I tell you practically, whatever documents, whatever information management gives us, we basically trust them. Okay, we place reliance on them. But yes, it shouldn't happen that we are not alert only. We have to be very alert, we have to be vigilant here. Okay, but again, we are not going to doubt every time on whatever management says. We don't have to be of suspicious nature. It is just that we need to be vigilant. Okay, I am repeating the definition again. What is professional skepticism? It is an attitude of the auditor due to which he remains alert for any possible misstatement in the financial statement. One more important word which you can remember here is questioning mind. He needs to be of questioning mind. But please remember, we don't have to be of suspicious nature. Being suspicious is something else, being vigilant is something else. Okay, so when we are saying we are being vigilant, this is what professional skepticism means. Okay, now one question, you all know this, that okay, this attitude of professional skepticism, we have to maintain it throughout the audit. It shouldn't happen that yes, you have at this particular moment, let's say you have initiated the audit, so you will be more alert. No. Or let's say towards the end of the audit, when you are about to sign the audit report, when you are about to come up with an opinion and sign the audit report, you are going to be more vigilant. It shouldn't happen in this way. You need to maintain the attitude of professional skepticism throughout the audit. Okay, now in exam, from the exams perspective, they may ask you what is professional skepticism, and then they may give you a question wherein we have to give some examples wherein the auditor needs to switch on his let's say radar of professional skepticism. He needs to be alert. So let me take you to the question first. What kind of questions can be framed from this part? Let us understand this first. Okay, so yes, this is a direct question here. The auditor is responsible for maintaining an attitude of professional skepticism throughout the audit. Do you agree with the statement? Obviously yes, we are going to write here what professional skepticism means. Okay, but at the same time, we have a question here which was asked in November 19. Okay, the auditor shall plan and perform an audit with professional skepticism, recognizing the circumstances may exist that cause the financial statement to be materially misstated. Okay, so discuss any 4 examples of professional skepticism. We need to discuss 4 instances, 4 circumstances basically, wherein the auditor needs to switch on his radar of switch on the light of, let's say, professional skepticism. He needs to be super alert now. All right, so what can be the 4 examples, 4 circumstances? Now let's say you are doing an audit, management told you that let's say there are no related party transactions, just an hypothetical example, and all of a sudden while you are going through the documents, you come across a particular person's name very frequently. Then you ask the management, then they tell, oh, he is the director's son. So initially they told us that no, we don't have any related party transaction. Now they are saying that he is a director's son. So basically when you find a contradictory evidence, again you should switch on your vigilant attitude. You should basically now be alert, right? So these are certain circumstances wherein the auditor needs to exercise the professional skepticism. So first is very good example, contradictory audit evidence. Okay, all right. Second, conditions indicating possible frauds. Obviously when you smell, when you sense that something fishy is there, let's say you have let's say a suspicion, let's say, or let's say you come across an instance which is hinting you towards some kind of fraud, obviously you will be now more alert. Okay. Third, conditions questioning reliability of the documents and responses. Now the document which management has given to us, or let's say the kind of responses they gave us when we were inquiring them, when we were inquiring of the management and TCWG, those charged with governance. So we are not, let's say, very satisfied with their responses. So this may again warrant us to be more alert, let's say. So again, a circumstance wherein you need to exercise professional skepticism. And then finally, circumstances suggesting the need for audit procedures. Circumstances suggesting the need for audit procedures in addition to those required by standards on auditing. Now please understand this. Now all the standards, I am sure that at least once you have gone through all the standards. Now all the standards tells us about, let's say, the different procedures that we need to apply. For example, in SA 501, there is procedure mentioned with respect to how are you going to, let's say, check on the inventory, right? But you know, in circumstances wherein you need to do something extra apart from what is written in standards on auditing, that means that item might be material and you need to be extra cautious there. Okay, so this is again one more circumstance, example of one more circumstance wherein you need to be alert, right? So these are the 4 examples there. Please remember this, okay? Because you know, the students who generally, what I've seen is the students who generally try and learn everything, those students will not be able to write these answers. You need to be very clear on the concepts. Please have faith in yourself. Be very confident that yes, you have understood the concept and you will be able to write. Don't doubt on yourself. All right. So what is the question that we just discussed? Please, I'm taking you back to the topic. Discuss any 4 circumstances of professional skepticism was asked in November 19. So I hope you are now clear on this. Okay. So when I say professional skepticism, 2 things you have to remember: the meaning and obviously the examples also. Okay. Now coming to the third requirement of SA 200, it is professional judgment. So very simple topic again. What do you mean by professional judgment? Now please understand this, that during the course of audit, you know, the auditor makes judgments in various situations. He needs to take a lot of decisions. So when an auditor, he takes a decision during the course of audit, it should not be based on, you know, his intuition. It should not be based on his intuition, or let's say he randomly thought something and he decides something. It shouldn't happen like this, right? Whatever decision he basically takes during the course of the entire audit, it should be based on his experience, knowledge and training. Please remember EKT, experience, knowledge and training. The auditor is not going to take any decisions randomly in a haphazard manner. He is going to take decisions based on his previous experience, based on his whatever training he has obtained, whatever knowledge, whatever level of knowledge he possesses. He is going to take decisions on the basis of this. So please remember, guys, whenever the word professional judgment comes, you know, remember 3 words: E, K and T: experience, knowledge and training. I don't want you to write random answers. Okay, so if a question on professional judgment is asked, these 3 words has to be there in the answer. What are the 3 words? Experience, knowledge and training. Okay, again we have a important question, you know, situations. This question, I remember it was asked once in the old course, that enumerate certain circumstances or situations wherein the auditor exercises professional judgment. And you know, many students were like, sir, from which topic they have asked this, we are not sure. From which particular standard they have asked this, we were not able to write. You almost read this line in all these standards, that the auditor needs to exercise professional judgment. How much sample size we need to consider? Professional judgment. What is material? Again, professional judgment. What amount of audit risk should we be accepting? Again, a matter of professional judgment. Okay, so any decision, you know, the auditor takes a lot of decisions during the entire course of audit. So these are the examples wherein the auditor exercises professional judgment. But again, let me tell you, he takes this decision not on the basis of his intuition or on a random basis. He uses his knowledge, he uses his experience and the relevant training which he has obtained once he, let's say, during the entire studies or after he becomes a chartered accountant. Okay, so we have a question here: what are the situations? Some examples I have just given. What are the situations wherein we need to exercise professional judgment? So it can be when we are planning and performing the audit, how shall we plan the audit? When we are planning the audit also, who shall be doing what, which let's say article of mine will be doing which area? All this again matter of professional judgment. When we are discussing on the materiality and audit risk, okay, when how much work do we need to perform, what types of audit procedure do we need to apply. So when we are deciding on the nature, timing and extent of audit procedure, again it is a matter of professional judgment. Whether a particular audit evidence that we have obtained, whether it amounts to sufficient and appropriate audit evidence or not, again it is a matter of professional judgment. Let's say there are two chartered accountants here. One might feel, chartered accountant A might feel that yes, this evidence is sufficient and appropriate, but I on the other hand, I might feel no, this is not sufficient and appropriate. Why? Again it is a matter of professional judgment. Chartered accountant A is not wrong here, okay, but again both of us, we have different professional maybe experience, we may have different kind of thought process. So please understand professional judgment, these are the situations wherein the professional judgment can be used. Okay, again 3 words whenever I discuss professional judgment: experience, knowledge and training. Fine. Okay, then we have the 4th requirement, a very basic requirement of SA 200. You all know this, that the auditor needs to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Okay, and you all know this, right? Sufficiency means the measure of quantity, the number of evidences that we need to obtain. And when I say appropriate, appropriateness obviously deals with quality of audit evidence. So this particular point, you know, sufficiency and appropriateness of audit evidence, we generally discuss this in detail when we cover SA 500. Okay, then finally we have conduct of an audit in accordance with standards on auditing. Okay, now before I take up this topic, I want all of you to answer this. Is standards on auditing, standards of auditing, does the auditor needs to mandatorily follow standards on auditing? Yes or no? Is standards on auditing mandatory in nature or recommendatory? Standard of auditing, are the standards on auditing mandatory to follow or is it recommendatory in nature? Priya says yes, is mandatory. Okay. Yes, okay. Yes, it is mandatory. Right, it is mandatory. Okay, now mandatory. So everyone is yes, of the view that standards on auditing are mandatory. Absolutely, you all are right. But have you come across the word guidance note? Please remember, guidance note are something different. Guidance note basically is again issued by ICA on various matters to guide the chartered accountants. Please understand that guidance note are not mandatory in nature; it is recommendatory in nature. But following the standards, the statements, whether it be accounting standards or the standards on auditing, it is mandatory in nature. Fine, fine. Okay. Now, the fifth, coming to the fifth requirement of the standard, conduct of an audit in accordance with standards on auditing. So, the first point here that you need to understand is auditor shall comply with all the standards relevant to an audit, all the standards which is relevant to the audit, and follow only relevant portion of standard if entire standard is not applicable. If the entire standard is not applicable, we need to follow only the relevant portion. Now, let's say okay, let's say we have yeah, let me take you the example 501. Now 501, if you remember, the 501 covers 3 aspects. One is with respect to inventory, one is with respect to litigation and claims, and the other one is with respect to segment reporting. Okay, now let's say that there are no litigation and claims or segment reporting, let's say, applicable to the entity. So the only portion which is relevant in SA 501 is with respect to inventory. So in this scenario, you know, SA 501 is applicable, but we need to comply with only those requirements which is basically relevant to the audit. Now, when there are no litigation claims in the company, all the requirements of 501 is not applicable to the company. Okay. Now, third point, in case of departure from a relevant requirement of SA, in case there is a departure, let's say we have not been able to follow the requirement of SA, the auditor shall perform alternative audit procedure. In case there is, let's say, because of some reason or the other, what is mentioned in the standard auditing, we were not able to follow, then in this scenario, okay, and then in the, okay, voice is changing, voice not clear, sir. Is it okay now? Okay, I don't know what is happening. When we used to do a live stream earlier, everything used to work very smoothly. but now there is always a problem. Okay, if it is is it manageable? Is it manageable? Let's complete essay 200 at least. Okay, now it is better. Fine. Yeah, so okay, it is just the voice. I probably I don't know how am I sounding, but okay, it is clear, but the voice changed. Maybe I don't know. YouTube must maybe YouTube did not like my original voice, so they have changed it. All right. Okay. So let's continue. Okay. So in case there is a departure, in case in some scenarios, let's say the standard tells us to apply this procedure, but let's say we are not able to apply a particular procedure, then we need to perform alternative audit procedure. Now, please remember this word alternative audit procedure. Okay. Now, again, we have one more point here. If objective of a relevant essay cannot be achieved, the auditor shall evaluate if the failure prevents auditor from achieving the overall objectives of auditor. In that case, he shall consider the need to modify the audit report or withdraw from the engagement. If you are not able to achieve the overall objective of auditor of the auditor, then probably we shall modify our report, or else we can, if law permits, we shall withdraw from the engagement. This means we shall resign from our work. Okay, so not very important, but yes, you just need to know the basics, that all standards on auditing which are applicable needs to be complied with. If the entire standard is not applicable, the relevant portions from the standard which are applicable needs to be complied with. And if there is departure, if let's say you are not able to follow the requirements of a particular standard, then you need to perform additional audit procedure. That's it. This is what you have to remember here. So guys, we are done with the 5 requirements of standards on audit of essay 200. Again, a very important question. And from this topic, there are a lot of different types of question which can be framed. So we have just covered the 5 requirements. Yeah, ethical requirements, professional skepticism, professional judgment, sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, and then conduct of an audit in accordance with standards on auditing. So before again I take up the last topic of essay 200, do you have any doubts with respect to the 5 points? Deepak is asking, anyone has idea whether sir will post this? All my videos will be posted, guys. Don't worry about it. I am taking live session. It will be there on YouTube, just like our Nugget series and all. No doubts. Okay, it is clear, right? So let us take up the third topic, the final topic of the essay 200 topic, essay 200. Okay, it is inherent limitations of audit. Now, this is not a part of the main standard, but yes, it is given in explanatory material of this standard. But yes, this is a very important topic from CA Inter's perspective. So let us discuss this. Question is asked directly from this part. Okay, so what are the inherent limitations we have? As per the standard, we have 3 inherent limitations of audit. Okay, and because of these inherent limitations, please try to relate now. Because of these inherent limitations, the auditor will never be able to give absolute assurance in case of audit. He is only going to come up with reasonable assurance. Okay, because of these inherent limitations of audit, the auditor will never be able to reduce the audit risk to 0. We can never set the audit risk to 0. Now, what is audit risk? Can anyone answer this? What is audit risk? What is audit risk? Yes, I'm waiting for your answers. Because of inherent limitations of audit, because of inherent limitations of audit, probably the auditor will never be able to set audit risk to 0. Okay, we have the answer. Shruti says risk of unable to identify a material misstatement. Okay, risk that auditor may give. Yeah, Priya is absolutely correct. Risk that auditor may give inappropriate opinion. Risk of giving an incorrect opinion. Okay, great. Fine, fine. Yes. So no, please, Mr. Aksa Roy. Audit risk is not risk of material misstatement. You are not correct here, please. Okay.
So some Vishwa has given the equation also, ROM into inherent risk. Okay, all right. ROM into inherent risk. This is wrong again. ROMM into detection risk is audit risk. Anyways, not let's not get into detail of audit risk now. We are going to cover it later. All right. So inherent limitations of audit, because of the inherent limitations of audit, we are only able to give reasonable assurance. So what are the inherent limitations of audit? Number one inherent limitation is the nature of financial reporting. It is the management and the TCWG who is responsible for the preparation and presentation of financial statements. But the financial reporting, because of its nature, we can never give an absolute assurance. Why? Because the management, they themselves use a lot of judgment while they are preparing the financial statements. They use a lot of accounting estimates. Now for example, if I tell you, management tells us this is the percentage of debtors that they are expecting will be bad debts, okay, and they make a provision accordingly. Now we don't have a formula for this, that okay, let's say 20% of the debtors will turn into bad. We don't have any formula. The management tells that we have to basically somehow agree to it, right? So please understand that the management is responsible for the preparation and presentation of financial statements, and while they do this, they themselves use a lot of judgment, and they use a lot of estimates. And estimates, all of you know this, that estimates are not, they are something which is very subjective. Different people will have different views on this, right? So because of these 3 points, these three are key terms basically which you should be writing under the head of nature of financial reporting. So because of these 3 points here, the auditor will not be able to give absolute assurance. Okay, then secondly, our the audit procedure that we apply, the procedures that we apply is most of the evidence. When we apply audit procedures, we obtain evidence, and when we obtain evidence, most of the evidence that we obtain are basically persuasive in nature rather than conclusive. We sometimes we don't have conclusive evidence, but because of the, let's say, explanation given to us by the management, because of the documents that they show to us, we need to somehow believe that okay, this is the truth, right? Now for example, let's say, just one example I like to quote here. Let's say the management, there is a holding company, let's say, and they made a sale of, let's say, around 2 crore rupees to its subsidiary during March, in the last week of March. Okay, sale of 2 crores to its subsidiary. A holding company made a sale of 2 crore rupees to its subsidiary. Okay, so and that happened, let's say, on 28th March, almost towards the end of the. First thing, you need to be alert now. Your radar of professional skepticism should be now on, basically, right? You need to switch it on. Now you'll be asking the management why this particular transaction was done. What is it that you have sold it to the subsidiary? Now it might so happen that seeing these type of transactions, the first thing that comes into the auditor's mind is that basically that the holding company wanted to inflated sales. They wanted to portray that yeah, they have good sales throughout the year, and they did a transaction with its subsidiary company. And that in the month of, again, in the next financial year, in the month of April, they are going to reverse this transaction. They are going to show it as sales return, let's say. But you are going to discuss with the management regarding this particular transaction, but they are going to come up with all the documents. They are going to show you that they had received sales order from the subsidiary company. The subsidiary company actually needs this. You have actually transported the goods to them. You are going to show the e-bill. You are going to show them the let's say outward, the freight expenses, etc. All things the management is going to show us. But at the back of my mind, I know that this transaction they have done just to inflate their sales. But when they have produced so much of documents, I cannot give an adverse opinion or a qualified opinion in this case, even though I know that they might reverse the transaction in the next financial year as sales return. So even if we apply procedures, we are only able to obtain persuasive evidence and not conclusive. As the management will provide us with various documents, and they basically try and persuade us, and there is no conclusive evidence as such in this regard. So even though I knew that this particular transaction will be reversed next year, I had no option, but I had to give a clean opinion. I cannot give a qualified opinion in this case because management has given me enough proofs, right? So please understand, the second The second inherent limitation of audit is with respect to nature of audit procedure. It says that when we apply audit procedure, we obtain audit evidence, and most of the audit evidence that we obtain is persuasive rather than conclusive. And sometimes management and TCWG, they don't provide us with complete information, and ineffective for detecting intentional misstatements. You all know this, that when there is a risk of material misstatement due to fraud. Now, fraud is something which will be very, very carefully, carried out by the management, by the employees. It will be very sophisticatedly designed, and they are basically they are going to try their best to conceal it. So you all know that fraud is something which is relatively difficult for an auditor to find as compared to errors. Okay, as compared to ROMS, risk of material misstatement due to errors. So our audit procedures, they are not very effective. They are not very effective in detecting intentional misstatements. When the management's intention is basically fraudulent, we perhaps will not be able to detect the same. Okay, we are only auditors. We are not CIDs. We are not investigators, right? We are only auditors, and generally. We don't, I told you this, that we need to be alert, but we don't have a suspicious nature. We don't doubt on everything that management produces, right? So our procedures becomes ineffective generally when it comes to frauds also. All right, and the last limitation is limitation with respect to time and cost. Okay, now this is a very important topic point here, that let's say it is a case of a company. You all know this, that the financial year ends on 31st March, let's say, and almost we have 6 months to complete the audit and send the annual report to the shareholders, and 6 months till the AGM will be conducted, right? So we have a very limited time to conduct the audit. So in case of big companies and all, probably we'll never be able to check all the transactions. So we don't do 100% checking. We resort to something called as test checking, or I can also call it as sampling. Okay, so there is always a limitation with respect to time and cost. So we resort to test checking, and then what we do, we tend to focus our attention to those areas which are relatively more risky, where those areas. So this is again one more limitation of audit, because of which we generally don't come up with an absolute assurance. We only give a reasonable assurance. Okay, so guys, please remember now, as per SA 200, please, this is a very important point which I'm going to tell you now. As per SA 200, there are 3 inherent limitations of audit: nature of financial reporting, nature of audit procedure, and limitation with respect to time and cost. But if I take ICI study material, okay, they have given one more. They have given one more inherent limitation of audit here, which is basically others. Now, please understand this others. This is not a part of the standard. They have just given it in their study material. Standards, as per the standards, we have only these 3 limitations. So please, if they ask you in the exam this question, as per SA 200, the explanatory part of SA 200, we have 3 limitations, but you also mention the other limitations with respect to fraud, etc. Okay, that is there in our study material. All right. So with this, guys, the entire SA 200 is over. So in short, that you need to cover in this particular standard is with respect to the requirements of SA 200. I have already told you there are 5 requirements, and from each of these requirements, especially requirement number 1, 2, and 3, a separate question may be framed, and we have discussed the questions also from this part. Okay, so SA 200 is over now. Any doubts that you have, please feel free to ask right now. Please write it in the chat box if you have any doubts. If you have no doubts, if you are clear on that topic, please write yes, so that I can start with SA 210. I can take up SA 210 now. ऋतिक says clear है, चलो अच्छा है. Shruti, clear, okay, clear, fine, great. Okay, Shruti has asked a question: the inherent limitation of an audit are not a justification for the auditor. Now, this is a good question. Please understand this, guys, that we all know that because of inherent limitations of audit, the auditor will only be able to give reasonable assurance. Now, let's say you do an audit, and you have given an opinion, and let's say 2 months or 3 months down the line, a fraud was uh, detected in the company. There was a case of fraud in the company. Okay, now what happens, let's say if there is a fraud in the company, obviously the first finger is always pointed to the management, and the second finger will be pointed towards the auditor. You were the auditor, what were you doing? Why were your audit procedures not able to detect that fraud happened? Okay, so now what is going to happen, you cannot just run away from the situation, or let's say by saying that no, even if there is fraud, because of inherent limitations of audit, I am not responsible. Because of inherent limitations of audit is going to save you, is going to save an auditor from going into behind the bar. Going to save you if you are able to prove, that you conducted the audit in accordance with standards on auditing. You need to show them the adequate documentation. That is what we are going to cover today in essay 230 also. Okay, so just the inherent limitations of auditor cannot be a justification for you. You need to prove that you did the audit in accordance with standards on auditing. You have maintained all the documentation. You have mentioned clearly all the audit procedures that you applied, all the evidences that you had obtained, all these things you have jotted, you have compiled it in your audit documentation, and this documentation in accordance with standards on auditing. Only when it is proved that you did all the entire audit in accordance with standards on auditing, then perhaps the inherent limitations of audit is going to save you. Okay, all right. I know. Okay, there is audio issue. Audio is a bit unclear and lagging. Okay, voice is muting. There is streaming issue. I think it should be fine. It should be fine. Yeah, as long as it is manageable, it is okay. Because last week also, because of the issues in streaming, I couldn't take this session. Fine. All right. So Shruti, I hope I'm clear on this. SM nuggets, please. SM nuggets. Okay. All right, continue. Yes. So let's now start with essay 210. Again, if you can all see, I have divided the entire topic into 5 parts here. Okay. First, we are going to understand the objectives, then something called as preconditions to an audit, then common understanding part, recurring audits, and change in the terms of audit engagement. Now, what is essay 210? Let's understand the name first. Agreeing the terms of an audit engagement. Agreeing the terms of audit engagement. Now, whenever you study any standard, guys, the first thing that should come into your mind is why this standard has been framed. You need to understand the basic, that why this standard has been framed. All right, now if that logic is clear, the entire standard is going to be very easy for you. Now agreeing the terms of audit engagements, it simply means, we are chartered accountants, we are into a very noble profession, we are very humble, and we don't like to engage into fights and all right. So let's say you are the client and I am your auditor. All right, so we generally, before I start the audit, before I take up your audit work, it is better that we agree to all the terms in advance, so that later on we don't end up fighting, or there is a dispute, or there is a disagreement between us with respect to fees or with respect to work, and then we fight, and then we not how a chartered accountant works. We are into a very noble profession, right? So what happens is, this standard, it tells us that before I accept my client's work, before I accept your work, let's say, okay, there has to be proper understanding. There has to be an understanding between the auditee and the auditor, so that there is no confusion in future, and there is no dispute as such in future. Okay. All right. So, essay 210, agreeing the terms of an audit engagement. First is, what is the objective? I have tried my best to tell you the objective here. Objective. What is the objective of this particular standard? It says the auditor, before accepting a new audit or conducting an audit conducting an audit engagement should ensure that. Now please understand, why is this standard there in our syllabus? As an auditor, why do we need to comply with SA 210? It says the auditor, before I accept your new work, or before I continue with your work, let's say in the new financial year, in the next financial year, ensure that preconditions for an audit are present. Now very important word, I shall be accepting your audit only when these two requirements are present. Okay, audio problem. Okay, I shall be okay. Now, I shall accept your work only when these two conditions are present. First is preconditions for an audit, and then second one is common understanding. There has to be a common understanding between the auditor and the auditee on the terms of audit engagement. Please remember, guys, as per 210, I am going to accept your work only when these two things are present. What are the two things? Preconditions to an audit. First, what is precondition? I'm going to explain it to you. Preconditions to an audit, and secondly, there has to be common understanding. So in short, I have written it in this way: acceptance of audit. You are going to accept an audit only when these two conditions are there. Acceptance of audit is what? Preconditions plus common understanding. Acceptance of audit is preconditions plus. What are the preconditions and common understanding? We are going to discuss these two words now. So if you can see, yeah, these are the two words that we need to discuss now: preconditions to an audit and common understanding. Okay, let me repeat it again. As an auditor, we are going to accept a work only when these two requirements are there. What are the two requirements? Preconditions must be there and common understanding. Now, what do you mean by preconditions? Let us understand this now. So I'm coming to the topic of preconditions to an audit. Okay. Now, there are two preconditions. Preconditions means simple words. Preconditions means that before even you say yes to the audit, you need to check on these two things. Whether management uses acceptable FRF. Now, let's say Shruti is my client, prospective client. Okay, I am the chartered accountant. She's sitting across the table. She comes up to me and she is like, "Sir, will you be our auditors?" I'll be like, "Yes, I'll be very happy that, okay, I'll be getting fees and all. I'll be very happy. Okay, I'll say yes, that I would want to be your auditors. It's okay. All right." But then before I say yes, I should first understand whether, Shruti, I'll ask Shruti, how do you prepare your financial, Shruti? Okay, you are a company. Let's say Shruti has a company. So I'll ask her, how is comes up and she tells me something like this: "So financial, we don't know how to prepare. We have heard something called as Schedule 3, but we are not very clear on what Schedule 3 is all about. But we have maintained our accounts in Tally." All this she tells me. Okay, so I ask her, "How do you calculate depreciation?" Sir, depreciation we have not calculated only. I thought because you are going to be an auditor, you are going to calculate it for us. Now, if a client like this with this knowledge comes to us, wherein they don't even have awareness about the type of financials that they need to make, the format of the financials that they need to follow, we are not going to accept their audit. Please understand, you are the auditor. It is not your duty to prepare the financial statements. The preparation and the presentation of the financial statements is the responsibility of the management. So the first thing that we need to ask the management is whether they have the knowledge of the FRF that is applicable on them. This is the first. Say, when I asked Shruti that how have you prepared your financial statements, now Shruti gives me a very awesome reply. So we are a company, let's say, we know that yes, on a company we are bound by to follow Schedule 3. We have to calculate depreciation as per Schedule 2. We need to calculate managerial remuneration, let's say, as per Schedule 5. We need to follow all the accounting standards as per Section 133. All this she keeps on telling. So I'll be happy now that okay, she has knowledge. She must have prepared financials as per the laws, as per the FRF. Okay, so this is the first point, whether management uses acceptable FRF and not. And secondly, acknowledgement by management of its responsibilities. Second precondition is Shruti should acknowledge these three things. What are the three things? Shruti should be acknowledging these three things: that the preparation of the financial statements is her responsibility, is the responsibility of the management and TCWG. Secondly, implementation and maintenance of internal controls is their responsibility. They have. And thirdly, they are going to provide us access. They are going to provide auditor with 3 points again. they are going to provide auditor with three things: access to all information relevant to preparation and presentation of financial statements. So I'll say yes only when Shruti agrees that yes, she is going to give me access to all the information relevant to preparation and presentation of financial statement. For example, if I ask for an invoice, they are going to provide me for with an invoice. If I ask them for vouchers, they are going to show me the vouchers. If I ask them for some underlying documents, if I ask them for ledgers, they are going to provide me with all information which is relevant for the audit. Secondly, any additional information that I may request, they are going to provide the additional request also, and they are going to provide me with unrestricted access to employees. Now the management, Shruti, must agree that they are going to provide me with unrestricted access to employees. Now, I may go to any employee and ask anything with respect to audit. Please remember, the employee need not be only from the financial department. The employee may be from marketing team, from HR, from logistics team, any employee. Okay. So please understand, guys, what are the preconditions? What are the preconditions to an audit? We have got two preconditions. This can be an important question now. Okay, there is an issue with the voice. Frequency of automatic. Let me check if something can be done from here. Just a moment. Is it not manageable at all? Am I audible? Okay. Not manageable. Fine. Audible है but disturbance है sir. Okay. Fine. As long as it is manageable, please bear with this issue. Okay. Anyways, all right. So again, guys, I told you that you under 210 you are going to accept an audit. Accept an audit only when the precondition is there. Only when there are these two requirements are there. Preconditions to an audit, and then there has to be common understanding. Okay. Now, when I say what are the preconditions, please remember two preconditions: that management, whether management uses acceptable FRF, and secondly, acknowledgement by management of its responsibilities. Management should acknowledge three responsibilities. What are the three responsibilities? That the preparation of the financial statement is their responsibility. They are the ones who are responsible for implementation and maintenance of internal controls. And finally, they are going to provide us access with all information, any additional information, and they are going to give us access to all the employees matters with respect to audit. We may just go and discuss with the employees. Okay, so these are the three preconditions. These are the two preconditions that has to be there. But apart from the preconditions, please understand again. Let me write it for you here, that an auditor is going to, please make it very clear, he is going to accept an audit. Acceptance will only is going to accept an audit only when the preconditions are present. Only when the preconditions are present, and at the same time there has to be a common understanding. There has to be a common understanding between whom? The auditor and the auditee. There has to be common understanding between the auditor and the auditee. Okay. Now, preconditions I've already told you, I've already discussed. There are two preconditions. What about common understanding, sir? Now, the common understanding has to be between the auditor and the auditee, the client. Okay. Now, common understanding, it can be done in several ways. We can just have an let's say agreement which is signed on. Let's say we can have a proper agreement, a bond paper and all. We can put all the terms and conditions there. But something which is more common, it is AEL, audit engagement letter. This is something which is more common, audit engagement letter. And audit engagement letter is basically made by the auditor and then sent to the auditee. So for developing the common understanding, we are going to focus on audit engagement letter, something which we call as AEL, Audit Engagement Letter. Why is AEL used? To develop the common understanding. Common understanding between whom? The auditor and the auditee. Okay. Now the preconditions we are done. Let us understand now the common understanding part. Okay. So I told you that commonly, generally, in order to develop the common understanding, we basically write all the terms and conditions in a document which we call it as AEL, Audit Engagement Letter. So agreed terms to be recorded in an audit engagement letter. All the terms and conditions has to be written in a document which we call it as audit engagement letter. This audit engagement letter, there can be an important question framed from this part. Okay, what are the contents of the audit engagement letter? What are the contents of the audit engagement letter? A separate question can be framed from this part. So we have different contents here. We have many different types of points which we can mention there in our AEL. Now, before I move forward, before I move ahead, I hope I am audible and you are able to grasp the concept. How many of you are with me? Are you able to follow me? Please write yes if you are able to follow me. If my voice is clear, please write yes so that I get to know. Okay, now audible and clear, fine. All right, so in order to develop the common understanding, the auditor will make an audit engagement letter and he's going to put in all the terms and conditions, right? So what all things should he be mentioning in the audit engagement letter? So let's understand this. The areas that they are going to cover in the audit, all these things he needs to cover. He can mention it in the audit engagement letter. Then his responsibilities. Let's make it very clear that this is my responsibility as an auditor, and management, these are your responsibilities. These are the responsibilities. Maintenance and implementation of internal controls, etc., is your responsibility. Let's make it very clear by writing it in our audit engagement responsibility. Then identification of applicable FRF. Let's make it very clear that yes, you are a company, so these are things which are applicable to you. These are the sections, these are the schedules which are applicable to you. Let's clear it out. Okay, there shouldn't be any chance of dispute later on. So we can mention the FRF also, and then reference to the audit report format. I can also, as an auditor, attach a reference, a format of the audit report to be checked by the manager, to comment upon, or I'm going to report upon. Okay, so what are the 5 things that we have just covered? What all things should be mentioned in AEL? Objective and scope of audit. Then we have responsibilities with respect to, let's say, auditor's responsibility, management's responsibility, then identification of applicable FRF, then adherence to audit report format. Okay, then again, these are some points, additional points which the auditor may mention in the AEL. We need to, generally what happens, common people, they think that if something has been audited, if a financial statements has been audited, there can not be any chance of fraud or error. There can the financial statements basically are 100% correct, but we need to make them aware that okay, even if we do the audit, we will not be in a position to give you absolute assurance. We will only be able to provide you with reasonable assurance. Why? Because our audit has some inherent limitations of audit. So let us make it very clear to the management that yes, management, we are your auditors, you are paying us the fees, we are going to do the audit, but let me tell you very clearly that we shall only be able to give reasonable assurance. Explain what reasonable assurance means also if required. Okay, so the fact that because of inherent limitations of audit, some material misstatements may not be detected. Now again, we can also include we can also mention about our tentative audit plan. We can include our tentative audit plan also, okay, in the audit engagement letter. Now one point which I always tell the students here is that you shouldn't, practically we never discuss the entire audit plan in detail with our clients. Okay, if I tell them in detail that okay, these are the things which we are going to do, probably he'll keep everything arranged and he'll sort everything out in advance, and then probably I'll not be able to find anything during the audit. So there has to be certain element of surprise. Okay, so we never generally share the detailed audit plan, but we only give them a tentative idea. Okay, this is the date on which we are going to start the audit. This is probably the number of days that we are going to take to complete the audit, tentative audit plan, right? Okay, Then arrangement required at the management's end. We can also write in the audit engagement letter that you need to provide during the course of audit, you need to provide us with this. Let's say I can ask them for a system. I can ask them for a system which is connected to their network, so that I can keep on check on the accounts, the ledgers, etc. I can ask them for a system access. Okay, I can ask them for a space to work. Okay, without any kind of disturbance. Okay, so all these things we can just mention in the AEL. Then most important point, which obviously all of us are going to write in the exam if this question comes, is the fees. Okay, this is one particular area wherein the dispute can happen, so it is better to clear everything out in advance, that okay, this is the basis of our fees, this is how much we are going to charge for the audit. Okay, and then finally, after writing all these terms and conditions in the piece of paper in the audit engagement letter, you know, as an auditor, we are going to prepare two AELs. We are going to prepare two copies. Okay, and one, we are going to ask the management to sign and acknowledge and return one copy to us. Okay, so that will be a proof of acknowledgement, basically, that yes, management acknowledges, management has accepted all the terms and conditions mentioned therein. So lastly, we can request management to acknowledge the receipt of AEL. Okay. All right, so these are the topics, these are the things, these are the contents of an AEL. This can be asked in the exam, has been asked earlier in the exam. Please remember, guys, that AEL, audit engagement letter, who prepares the audit engagement letter? Please answer this. Who prepares the audit engagement letter? Is it the management or the auditor? Yes, auditor. Okay, please be very careful on this. It is the auditor who prepares the audit engagement letter, and after he prepares it, he hands it over to the auditee. Okay, all right. So now, guys, please understand that we are done with the first part of the standard. Okay, and I told you that the auditor is going to accept an audit only when these two things are there present: preconditions plus common understanding. So we have done preconditions separately, and the common understanding part is also over. Okay, now auditor is right, all of you are correct. Yes. Okay, now common understanding part is also done. Now a very important question is, let's say, please understand this, again, Shruti is my client, she has a company. Okay, so I have done the audit for, let's say, 31st March 2020. Okay, this was the first year and we have done the audit. Now again, for the financial year 2021, the question is, do I need to again make an AEL and give it to Shruti? Let's say Shruti is the management of the company. Do I need to again make an AEL and give it to Shruti? So what happens in case of recurring audits? What happens in case when you are doing audits continuously? Do we need to come up with fresh audit engagement letter every year? Okay, so please understand, it is a matter of professional judgment. If there are, let's say, no changes, entire terms and conditions is same, probably it is not required to come up with fresh AEL again and again each year. Okay, but again, if we feel that there are some changes, certain changes which are necessary for again developing a fresh understanding, AEL can be made, and each year a fresh AEL can be given to the management. Okay, so but generally what we advise, it is considered as a healthy practice, even if there are no changes. Let's say there are no changes in terms and conditions, how much time will it take? You just need to copy it from the previous year and put it, and just give a fresh document to the management, obtain their signature and keep it with you. Okay, so taking AEL, even if there are no changes as such, it is considered as a healthy practice. It is up to you whether you want to take a fresh AEL or not. But in certain circumstances wherein there are a lot of changes, let's say the management of the company has changed, let's say there is a change in my audit report, I need to take few more requirements from you, there are certain more new requirements. Okay, there is a change in FRF, all these things, or let's say I have increased my audit fees. So if this happens, I need to come up with a fresh audit engagement letter. Okay, so in case of recurring audit, what happens, please understand, we need to assess whether circumstances require revision in terms of audit engagement, and whether there is a need to remind the entity of its existing terms of the audit engagement. So the auditor will assess the circumstances and accordingly decide whether he needs to give a fresh AEL. Okay, but please understand this, an important question can be framed from this part. that auditor may decide not to send new AEL every year. It is up to him. But however, fresh AEL, fresh audit engagement letter may be needed if there is a change in. Now, these are the examples which we are going to discuss now, wherein the auditor needs to basically come up with a fresh audit engagement letter. Okay, so these are certain examples. Let's say, uh, okay, where it is, let's say, required by law or legal requirement, whether there is a legal requirement to send AEL every year, we need to send it. Now, let's say where there is a change in FRF, there is a change in law or legal requirement, then we need to come up with a fresh AEL. When there is a change in FRF, financial reporting framework, then we should come up with a fresh AEL. When there is a change in our reporting requirements, let's say new CARO will be applicable from next year. When there is a change in our reporting requirements, we need to come up with a fresh AEL. Okay. If there is a change in management altogether, Shruti was the management of the company, now it has been taken over by some other person. Okay. When there is a change in the management, I need to remind them of the fresh terms and conditions. When there is a change in the nature or size of the business of the entity, the business of the entity altogether changes, the size changes, the type of business they were into changes altogether, then come up with a fresh AEL. Okay, there is a change in the fee, and then there is a change in your audit plan or the procedures that you were supposed to apply. So in all these cases, these changes, we need to come up with a fresh AEL. Now, if you see, the first three changes are more of the changes which is external changes, which is neither related to the management of the company nor the auditor. These are something which is totally external. Change in law, change in FRF, not in our hands, right? Change in reporting requirements. All right. Now, these 2 points are basically with respect to management. Changes caused by the management. Changes caused that management, if there is a change in management or if there is a change in the size or nature of the business, then new AEL should be sent. Okay, then these last two changes are from the perspective of the auditor, that the auditor changes the fees, let's say, or the let's say I change my audit plan, the procedures. Okay, so in this case I need to come up with a fresh AEL. I hope you are clear on this, right? So please remember that generally it is up to the auditor to decide whether he wants to send a fresh AEL or not. But it is considered as a healthy practice to send AEL every year. No issues about it, right? But in case there are certain changes, these changes which we have just covered, then auditor should be sending fresh AEL every year, right? Okay. So guys, this was the topic of recurring audits. This was the topic of recurring audits. Now, before I take up the last topic, do you have any doubts in this? Do you have any doubts in the concept of recurring audits? Okay, Shruti is asking, what if a situation arises in which management misunderstood the scope and objective of audit? Obviously, so if they have misunderstood, I have just written it clearly here that now if they have misunderstood, there is a clear need that the auditor needs to remind them of the right objective and scope. So again, better to come up with an AEL. Fine. All right, guys, and just one request. If you are able to follow the lecture, if you are able to grasp the concept, please hit the like button. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please do it. The likes and the more subscribers, it really motivates us. And also, if you find the video useful, do share it with your friends. So please hit on the like button. Already like, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Done. Utsav is asking recorded रहेगा रहेगा भाई रहेगा. Okay, fine. So last topic, change in the terms of audit engagement. Change in the terms of audit engagement. Now what happens at times, please she has accepted the audit engagement letter. She has very well put on, signed and put on the company's seal, and they have just acknowledged the entire terms and conditions. And let's say I start the audit. Now Shruti tells me something. Okay, she tells me something which is, let's say, against the terms and conditions. Now, should I be accepting now what Shruti is telling me? Okay, so the point here is change in terms of audit engagement. Before completing the audit, if the client requests the auditor to change the terms, that conveys lower assurance. Now please understand, if Shruti tells me now, sir, please don't check our fixed assets, should I be doing it? Should I agree to her request? Please understand, if something, if it conveys, if she's asking me to reduce the scope of my audit, if she's asking me to do something which is going to give a lower level of assurance, I should first see whether there is a reasonable justification of doing so. Okay, so consider whether there is a reasonable justification of change. Okay, and if there is reasonable justification, let's say, please understand now, Shruti tells us that I gave a tentative audit plan. I told Shruti that, okay, from today is Monday, from Wednesday, we are going to come for the audit. Okay. And in the evening now, Shruti calls me, sir, on Wednesday we have a problem. We are doing a renovation or of office, so some cleaning work will be done on Wednesday. Sir, you please start the audit from Friday. Now, if she asks me to do this, okay, probably I'll agree. Probably I'll agree to this, because as such, it is not going to give a lower level of assurance to the users. Okay, but now Shruti tells me that, oh, sir, please don't check our fixed assets. Should I be agreeing to this request of her? No, obviously the answer is no. So the point that you need to understand, the key word that you need to remember here is, if my client is asking me for a change, I should see whether there is reasonable justification. I should see whether there is reasonable justification of such change. If the answer to this is yes, then agree to the new terms. We can agree to the new terms. Probably again I'll make a fresh AEL, write the new term, and I'll get it signed from you. Okay. But if I don't agree, if I don't find the reason of you asking me for a change as justifiable, okay, so if the reason is not justifiable, and on top of that, you are now not allowing me to continue my work, management does not permit the original engagement, Shruti doesn't let me check the fixed assets, you are not allowing me to continue with the original terms and conditions, in this case, what is going to happen? In this case, either I have to withdraw from the engagement, that means I should resign, and I need to communicate the same either with the TCWG or the regulators or the owners, that means the shareholders, regulators as in ROC and all. If I resign from a company, I need to file the form ADT3, right? So I hope this is very clear. What was the topic? We just covered changes in terms of audit engagement. So please understand, if the client requests for any change, what is the keyword that you need to remember? You need to check on the reasonable justification is there or not. If the answer to this is yes, if you feel that yes, they are the whatever request they are making us for a change is reasonably justifiable, then you can go ahead with the change and you should accept. You can put the new terms in writing. But if it is not justifiable and they are not letting you continue with the old terms and conditions, you should withdraw from the engagement, and at the same time you should communicate the same with either the TCWG or the shareholders, owners, or maybe the regulators. Okay, so guys, this is all about SA 210. So see, if you do it in this way, topic by topic wise, the standards are really very easy. Students are generally of the opinion that they find standards really very boring, but trust me on this, that if you go by the logics, if you go by the basics, these standards are going to fetch you a lot of marks. It can be really very scoring in the exam. Okay, so all in all, the major topics the major topics we have done, basically 1, 2 and 3, 1, 2 and 3, this is one topic only, okay, that you are going to accept an audit only when the preconditions are present and when there is a common understanding. And apart from this, there are only 2 topics that you need to cover here. Is one is what? Recurring audit, and the second is change in the terms of audit engagement. And with this, our essay 210 is over. Is this clear to everyone? Any doubts? Let me meanwhile, if you have any doubts, please feel free to ask. Let me just take you to the questions, question bank of essay 210. Let us check what are the questions that have been framed from this particular topic. Okay, so the first question is, what is the purpose of audit engagement letter? That is letter of engagement. So they're asking you for the contents of letter of engagement. Okay, then again, P and auditor decides not to send a new engagement letter to G Limited every year. Whether he is right in his approach, I told you it totally depends from auditor. Okay, and state the circumstances where sending new engagement letter would be appropriate. Okay, so we have already discussed certain circumstances wherein a fresh AL is required. Okay, so these are the topics, not as such. We have covered all the topics. Yeah, any doubts? Coming back to the doubts, any doubts you have? Sandeep is asking, would you revise all standards on auditing? Yes, my plan is to revise all the standards on auditing. I wanted to start it last week, but then there was some technical issue, and now we have been able to resolve. But still, I can see that there is an issue with us. The problems do not arise. उत्सव पीडीएफ कहाँ मिलेगा नोट्स? आई शेयर इट उत्सव, आई ये मैं शेयर कर दूंगा आप लोगों के साथ. But my advice to all of you is keep that standards and all, you just because now hardly almost a month is left, not even a month is left for your exams. I would advise you to follow the material that you have been following. Don't now start all together with a new material. Yes, you can follow the charts and all, but please stick to the material which you have been studying with. Okay, all right. So now let us quickly, just a few more minutes, let us start quickly with essay 230, another basic standard, a very simple standard 230. Venugopal is question 16 in EIS. Any doubts with respect to EIS and question number as such, please ask me in my Telegram. You can DM me direct message on Telegram. Okay. All right. Now essay 230. This is probably all the students like this standard a lot. It is very simple and very a small standard relatively. Okay. So essay 230, it is with respect to audit documentation. Again, before I start with the standard, as I told you that you should be knowing that why this particular standard is there and why an auditor has to follow this standard. Okay, so Shruti, I remember, had asked one question that will the inherent limitations of auditor always save the will the inherent limitations of audit always save the auditor, right? Please remember that audit documentation, the purpose of keeping the documentation, the purpose of keeping all your working papers is to basically prove, it is a proof that you have done your audit as per the standards on auditing, that it is a proof that you have complied with all the standards of auditing. And if the documentation is proper, if you are in a position to show that you have complied with all the relevant standards on auditing and all, then probably the inherent limitations of audit is going to save you. Okay, so this is a very, very important standard. What is the meaning? So we have I have divided the standard into 7 topics. Okay, what is the let's understand the meaning first, meaning of audit documentation. So all of you know this, that audit documentation refers to recording of 3 things. When I say audit documentation, I am as an auditor going to keep a record of 3 things. What are the 3 things? What all procedures have I performed? After applying the procedures, what all evidence have I obtained? And what conclusions have I drawn from those evidence? Okay, so all these 3 things I have to document. 3 words. What are the 3 words? What are the procedures that I applied? Okay, what is the evidence that I have obtained after applying the procedure? And then what is the conclusion that I have reached? Okay, now just for an example, let's say you are examining the land and building. that is there in the balance sheet. So I'll apply procedures. Let's say I do a physical verification of the land and building. This is procedure number 1. Okay, then I ask them for the title deeds, I ask them for the documents, just to check whether the building is in the name of the company or not. Again, this is procedure number 2. Then I ask them for a let's say they have shown the building as land and building as of 3 crores, so I ask them that for the valuation certificate. So this is again procedure number 3. So all these procedures is giving evidence, right? And by all the evidences that I have obtained, I'll draw a conclusion that okay, the land and building is, it means, in simple words, it means recording of 3 things: audit procedure, audit evidence obtained, and conclusions the auditor has reached. You all know what the other name of audit documentation, it is also known as working papers. We can call audit documentation as our working papers also. Okay, all right, so this is the meaning, very simple. Let us quickly understand the nature of audit documentation. I told you audit documentation provides evidence of the auditor's basis for audit report. I told you, why do we need to keep the audit documentation? It gives us evidence, it provides evidence on the basis of our report. That means it forms a basis of our report, evidence of the auditor's basis for our audit report. Why did we give a qualified opinion? Or let's say, how did we come up with a unqualified opinion? It serves as a base, right? It provides an evidence, and evidence that audit was planned and performed in accordance with essays and other requirements. Okay, so this is not very important nature, you all know this. Now, purpose, again, what is the purpose of audit documentation? Very simple, we have 6 purposes here. You know, audit documentation helps in planning and performance of audit. Now let's say Priya has just cleared her CA intern, Priya, and she joins an office as an article. Okay, now if her boss, if the principal tells Priya that okay, Priya, you need to go to this audit, okay, and you have to do this, you have to do that, then you have to check on this, you have to do that. 20 minutes of lecture the principal gives to Priya. Okay, everything the principal has told Priya verbally. Now by the time Priya comes out of the office of the principal of the CA, okay, she'll hardly remember anything, right? So what happens, if everything is documented, if our audit plan is documented, it will help Priya in better performance of the audit. So the first benefit, the first purpose of audit documentation is better, it helps in planning as well as performing the audit. Now if entire plan is well documented, probably when Priya goes to the audit, she now knows, she'll see the plan, she knows, okay, in case of fixed assets we have to do this, in case of inventory we have to do this. So she'll be in a position to perform the audit also really well. Okay, so this is the first point. Now second point, let's say I am the CA and Priya is doing the audit, right? So once in a week or maybe every day in the evening, I go and I check whether Priya is doing her duty as required or not. Okay, I just go and check upon her work. So when everything is documented, it helps in better supervision and review of audit also. Now during the course of audit, let's say during the entire day, if Priya must have come out across any particular doubt or any particular issues, she must have noted it. Okay, and then in the evening when I go, she'll discuss all those issues with me, and whatever suggestions I give, she'll probably write it in the remarks column also. So if we have everything documented, it helps in better supervision and review also of the entire audit. Third is accountability of staff. Now let's say 3 articles are doing the audit. Okay, on the basis of these audit documentation papers, I'll be able to find out, I'll be able to be very certain, okay, fixed assets was checked by Priya, okay, Devika checked inventories, okay, Utsav had checked the debtors, because they'll maintain the respective documents with respect to debtors or inventory or fixed assets. Okay, so accountability is also established. Now let's say if I find something wrong later in debtors, I'll straight away ask Utsav, you had checked the debtors, how did you perform? Let's do a discussion, right? So documentation also establishes accountability. Then future audit reference, this is something which we generally do. Let's say I'm doing the audit of this particular entity next year also. Now Priya, Utsav and Devika, probably they'll all refer to the last year's documentation also. Okay, how did we deal with this item last year? Let's see. So these audit documentation, they help us in future also. They help us in doing future audits also. Okay. Then this again, audit documentation, it is helpful in quality reviews also. We are going to cover this in our standards also, quality standards also, and then there's a concept of peer review also. If let's say we want to check, if another partner wants to check whether the work was done properly or not. Let's say in my CA firm we have two partners. Okay, I do the audit, but the other partner will check on my work, and then if he's satisfied with the quality of the work that I have performed, then only I'm going to sign my audit report. So all these documents will help him in determining whether the quality was maintained or not. Okay, and then external investigation. Let's say my client, they indulge in some kind of fraud and there is a CBI investigation going on. So the CBI people, they come to my office also to question and interrogate me and ask me some questions. Okay, so then these documents will serve as a proof that okay, yeah, I did this as per the standard or not. In case of debtors, this was the procedure that I had applied. So these are some of the examples, guys. The purposes of audit. Documentation. Okay, again let me just repeat the headings, and I'm very sure if you are able to remember the headings in the exam, you'll be able to write it well. Okay, so planning and performance of audit, then we have supervision and review of audit, accountability of staff, future audit reference, quality reviews, and then we have external investigations. Okay, all right, so this is what purpose means. Now coming to the next topic, form, content and extent. Form, content and extent of audit documentation. Let us first understand what is the meaning of these three words. Okay, so form means, form, our audit documentation can be in any form. It can be a hard copy, it can be soft copy. These days all the documentations we maintained it can be maintained in a Word file, it can be in Excel file, or I can just keep a diary and write everything in by hand. Okay, so when I say form of my audit documentation, it can be hard copy or it can be a soft copy also. When I say content, I have already discussed this. What all things are we going to keep right in our documentation? So I told you what procedures we apply, what evidences we obtain, and the conclusions that we draw. These are the basic contents of my documentation. So if you can see here, nature of audit procedures, who performed what. Okay, so matters, things that we tested, let's say debtors, inventories, etc. Who performed, who reviewed it, on which date the procedure was applied. All these things we can the details of which we can just write it. Okay, results of audit procedures performed. Results as in the significant matters arising during the audit. Now Priya, she's doing the audit and she writes all the issues that she encountered during the audit, and then when I come to supervise, okay, she is going to discuss the matters with me. So any significant event that she came across during the audit, she'll just write it in her documentation. So contents can be, please remember the three words: procedures, evidence and conclusions. First point. Second, any issues which during the course of an audit we encounter, we can keep a note of the same. Who applied the procedures, on which date the particular procedure was applied, who checked on the work, who reviewed the work, on which date the review was done. All this can be a content of our audit documentation. Okay, and extent, how much documentation should we be maintaining. Okay, so generally extent is basically quantity of our working papers. Okay, so in this particular topic, if you can see, form, content and extent, I have just divided the topic into two parts. One is basics, just for your understanding, that what do you mean by form, what do you mean by content, what do you mean by extent. Okay, now comes the real question, an important topic. What are the factors affecting the form, content and extent of audit documentation? This is a very important question that can be asked directly from essay 230. What are the factors affecting form, content and extent of audit documentation? Okay, very important question. So we have 6 points here. Okay, now you all know this: the bigger the size of the entity. Okay, let's discuss this now. The bigger the size of the entity, don't you think the chances of my documents, the file size, will increase or not? We might have to keep more documents, we might have to maintain more things. Do you agree with this or not? Can I say that the extent, I can say it depends on the size of the entity? Yes or no? The bigger the entity, the chances that there will be more documentation. Do you agree with this? Yes, okay. So, all right. So, what is the topic that we are covering? What are the factors affecting form, content, and extent of audit documentation? So, the size and complexity of the entity. The more complex the entity, probably you will have to maintain more documents. Then, identified RMMS, identified risk of material misstatement. Now, you have you have let's say before we actually start our audit, we just assess the ROMS. If you assess higher ROMS, probably our nature, timing, and extent of further procedures will be high. Okay, and when we have to perform more audit procedures, when we have to do more work, probably we'll need to maintain more documentation. So if the identified or assessed ROMS is high, our extent, our document content will be high. Okay, then what our again documentation depends on the type of procedures that we apply, the audit methodology, and the tools that we use. Sometimes you all know this, for sampling, let's say sampling, we use computer assisted auditing techniques. We can use Excel, we use a lot of softwares to do sampling and all. So what kind of tool, what kind of methods that we are using to do the audit is also one of the factors in determining the is one of the factors affecting the form, content, and extent of audit documentation. So when I say audit methodology and tools, just remember software or all. If we use software during while for our audit procedures, I gave you the example of sampling and all, then probably this is also one of the factors which affects our form, content, and extent of documentation. Then how important is an audit evidence? Significance of audit evidence. Now please understand, if probably let's take it in this way. You are vouching the invoices, you are checking on the purchases, let's say. So whatever whatever purchase invoice you have vouched, you don't need to take a copy of each of them and keep it in your audit file. Okay, probably whatever invoices that we checked, we can just take a note of the invoice number. But let's say there is a very important order, let's say there is a very important verdict by the High Court against the company. Now this particular verdict or order is very important. Okay, this is very important. So probably you'll keep an entire copy of the order in your audit file. So please understand, again, the extent of our documentation depends on the significance of audit evidence. I have vouched, let's say 500 vouchers. I don't need to keep a copy of all the 500 vouchers. If I just keep a note of the number of the invoices, it is going to be sufficient. But on the other hand, because verdict was given by the High Court, let's say against the company, which is critical to the financial statement, let's say, probably we might keep the entire copy of the verdict, copy of the order, and place it in our audit file. So significance of audit evidence is also one of the factors. Okay, and then we have nature and extent of exceptions. Again, nature and extent of exceptions. By exceptions, I means the actual risk of material misstatement, actual misstatements, not risk of material misstatements, the misstatements. During the course of audit, if you find misstatements, obviously you are going to put in more efforts, more audit procedures, and accordingly your working papers will also increase. Now please understand, don't get confused between point number 2 and point number 6. Point 2, let me clarify. Point number 2 is identified ROMS. It is risk of material misstatement. That means you feel that there might be a misstatement. It is an assessment of misstatements, right? Risk of material misstatement. But when you are doing the audit, when you are, let's say, doing substantive procedures and you actually come across a misstatement, this is basically, I can call it as exception. Exception is nothing but actually misstatement. Okay. Alright, so there is a difference between point 2 and point number 3. Alright, now this can be asked in the exam. So guys, please be very careful regarding this topic. Factors affecting form, content, and extent of audit documentation. Okay, then, alright, assembly of audit file. Next topic that we have is audit file. Now please understand, what do you mean by audit file? Let me just try and explain you that first. Okay, now let's say there are three articles. There are three articles whom we have given. They are going for a particular audit. Let's say we have okay. Let's say we have Priya. Okay, then we have Shruti. Okay, and then we have Vinay. We have Vinay. So Vinay, Shruti, and Priya, they go for an audit. Okay, they work in a same firm, same CA firm, and they form a team and they go for an audit. Now Priya, let's say she is checking on the asset sides. Okay, so she will maintain her documents with respect to the asset sides. Let's say Shruti is checking on the expenses. Vinay is checking on, let's say, the income part, etc. So handling different areas of the financials, and they'll maintain their own documents. Now what happens, because these three people, these three articles, these three audit team members, okay, they have maintained their own documents. Now what happens, there is a need that, okay, we need to compile, we need to, you know, compile all these all these documents into a file. This is a file. We need to keep all the documents at one place. Let's say Priya's documents, Shruti's documents, and then Vinay's documents. So when we compile all the documents and we put it in one file, you know, this particular file will be known as audit file. Okay, so when now the topic that we are going to cover, the topic that we are going to cover is when should we be making this audit file, okay, and how can this audit file be maintained. So there is a topic of assembly of audit file. Each one of the article will keep its own documents, but when should we be assembling the entire documents and keep it in one audit file, okay. So let's understand this. Working papers should be assembled on a timely basis. The point is, working papers should be assembled as per SA 230, you know, SA 230 says that all your working papers should be assembled on a timely basis. Okay, you know, okay, before I move ahead, get into detailed discussion, okay, I just want to ask you one question. When is the documentation required to be kept? Priya, Shruti and Vinay, they have gone for the audit. Should they be maintaining the document should they prepare the document at the start of the audit or at the end of the audit, or do you think that they need to maintain the documents as and when they do the audit? What is the correct answer? What do you think? They should be maintaining the documentation. When should they be maintaining the documentation? At the start? Yeah, Abhishek is correct here. As and when they audit, yeah, simultaneously, okay, concurrently. So they do the audit, and as you know, simultaneously they should update their documentation. Why? Because if they do it at the end, they might miss out on some important things. So as and when you do the audit, you need to maintain documentation, okay. I hope you understand this. But now the topic that we need to cover here is, they have maintained the documentation. As and when Priya, Vinay and Shruti were auditing, they have maintained their documentation. But the point here is, individually they had maintained, now we need to keep them in a file, okay. So when should this assembling be done? So as per SA 230, working papers should be assembled on a timely basis, okay. But SQC1, you know, SQC1 has given us a specific timeline here. It says that assembling should be done in not more than 60 days after the date of audit report. So it says once you are done with issuing the audit report, then please, within 60 days from the date of audit report, do all the administrative work. Just assemble all the documents, put it properly in a file, and you can basically sort all the documents and maintain it in a chronological order or in any organized manner, okay. So SQC1, please remember, SA 230 says that assembly also has to be done on a timely basis, but it is SQC1 which has given us the limit that it should be assembly should be done not more than 60 days after the date of audit report, okay, fine. Now let us discuss about retention. How long is an auditor required to maintain the audit documentation for, to keep the audit documentation for, okay. Now please understand this, that let's say we are maintaining hard copy of our audit files, okay, and these files, they occupy a lot of space, you know. uh, the rent these days are so very high, and you know, if I take a small office on rent, then probably I need to you know, take out space specifically for keeping all my files. And also, you know, how long should we be keeping these files? So we have a topic on retention. So it says the auditor shall not delete or discard assembled documents. We shouldn't delete or discard any assembled documents before the end of its retention period. And retention period is not shorter than 7 years from the date of audit report. So even if that particular client was your client for 1 year, you need to maintain their documentation for next 7 years from the date of audit report. It says not shorter than 7 years from the date of audit report. So you need to maintain that file. You need to keep it in your office, be it in a hard copy or soft copy, for at least 7 years. So retention period is 7 years. Okay. Now the last topic with respect to SA 230, ownership. The working papers, you know, it has been prepared by the auditor. So yeah, so you all know that who is the owner of the working papers. Audit documentation is the property of the auditor. You all know this, that the documentation is the property of the auditor. But we have some points here. Can the auditor please understand now this. Can the auditor share his audit documentation? Can the auditor share his working papers with the client or the government authority or with the third party? Okay. So I have created three scenarios here. No doubt the audit documentation is the property of auditor, but you know, the if the auditor wants, he can make portions of his working paper available to the client. It is up to the auditor's discretion. It is up to the auditor's discretion. If he wants, he can share some portions, some extracts from his audit working paper and give it to the client. Now for example, let's say during the course of audit, I made a very amazing schedule for depreciation. Okay. And obviously this is my working paper, but the client also sees it, and the client tells me that if you give this format to us, from next year on year, we'll prepare a document like this for you. Okay. And it is going to help us also. This is a very excellent format. So if I want, I can give a copy to them. No problem about it. Okay. So sharing with clients, I can do it. I can make some portions or extracts from my documentation available to them, totally upon my discretion, sorry. Sharing with government authority, okay, so only if there is a legal obligation to do so. If you are able to recall, in essay 200 we covered a principle of confidentiality. I told you that we cannot, if we come across any information during the course of audit, we cannot share it with our third parties, but we can share it only if it is our legal or professional duty to do so, and if we have been expressly permitted by the client to do so, right? So in case of let's say sharing with government authority, if it is our legal obligation to do so, probably we might have to share. But sharing with third party, we are discussing that audit working papers can it be shared with third party. Okay, so only if client permits, only if my client permits, only if it is permitted by my client. Okay, so I hope this is going to make it clear for you. We have discussed the entire concept of ownership also. All right, now any doubts guys? 230, the three standards that we have covered today are reasonably relatively very easy standards, and they can be very scoring also. But yeah, we are going to cover all these standards in the next session. I'll take up essay 240, 250 and 299. 240, 250 and 299. But before we wind up today's session, any doubt in 200, 210 and 230? Any doubt in the three standards that we have covered? Okay, clear, sir. All right. Jagadish says everything is clear. Okay, most welcome. Ali says no doubts. Clear, sir. Okay, great. And if you have guys any feedback to give, once the video is uploaded, do write in the comments box. Okay, so that I see it. Okay, and then I implement it from the next session itself. Okay, so we are going to meet soon, probably tomorrow itself. We are going to cover again, I told you, three standards: 240, 250 and 299. So with this, if we by the end of tomorrow's session, we are going to be over with our 200 series, which is all the standards which is applicable for CA intermediate level of 200 series. Okay, fine. All right, guys. So I am waiting for your comments, guys. Once the video is posted and processed, please do comment. Please share with your friends. And thank you again so much for being a wonderful audience, for being patient listeners. Okay. Keep studying. Best wishes. Most welcome, guys. See you soon. Bye bye.